Don't they look great? Look at that woolly bum. Look at you, big boy. You're so huge. You're such a big dude. Okay, you ready? Let's go.
My name is Tammy White, and I am the proprietress at Wing and a Prayer Farm. I'm shepherdess and natural dyer and gardener and yarn seller and event manager and all the chief cook and bottle washer duties as well. On Wing and a Prayer Farm, we raise sheep of many different breeds for fiber, and we also have alpacas for fiber. We have one cashmere goat for fun. We have some equine friends. We have some guardian animals. We have mini donkeys and horses. And I also raise dye stuffs in my dye gardens, and I am a dyer and dye all of the yarns that we make with the fiber from our farm. We do a lot of mucking. I'm cleaning stalls and cleaning the barn quite a bit. I'm moving hay, I'm moving grain, I'm carrying water. I do a lot of big work. And then I do a lot of small work. I have to tie tags on all of the yarn skeins that go out of here and price things and all of that. We started to farm in 2000. My kids were younger. They were, I think, 9, 7, and 5, something like that. And we got some Shetland sheep because we wanted to be able to sustainably graze the property, which was, we have about 20 acres. And so our flock was tiny at first. We had a mama and her twins, and within 24 hours, I knew we would have to have more. So I put in an order for a little ewe lamb. Her name was Maggie. And then as soon as Maggie was old enough, we bred her, and so she was the matriarch of our Shetland flock that we have today. And then throughout the years, we added, I think it was in 2005, added some rescues, and then they were Cotswolds. So we really hadn't intended on diversifying the breed stock, but it's just how it went. And then I think I brought my Cotswold fiber and my Shetland fiber to a mill with my Angora goats fiber, their mohair, and the mill owner, Michael Hampton, said, "Oh, Tammy, what you need are some cormos to go with this longwool." And so I said, "Oh, Michael Hampton says I need some cormos." So I started researching getting cormo sheep. And the next thing you know, I started having a cormo flock as well. That's how it came to be that I ended up with 8 different breeds on the farm. Right now, I think I'm at 7 breeds. My flock is at around 70 head right now, 75 head. I just had 5 lambs, and it's going to grow more in May when we have the rest of our lambs this year. So it's usually between 70 and 100 sheep. I seem not to be winding down or retiring. It seems like I'm growing because it was in 2010 that I had that decision in front of me and my kids had moved up and out. They were into careers and college, etc. But by then I had 10 years of experience. I had the infrastructure. And so instead of downsizing, I decided to turn my hobby farm into a full-on production farm and started selling yarn at farmers markets, and then started vending at festivals that featured sheep and wool, put my yarn into an online shop and had an Etsy shop for many years. Then I finally got a website for myself and made an online shop there. And so it was just one of those things that snowballed very authentically and organically. And so it's been easy to sustain it because it's been a really genuine, from the heart kind of a growth. And it all centers on my love of the animals and my love of the outdoors and gardening and just the natural world. It's a really good question to wonder, like, which came first, the chicken or the egg? Did I want to make yarn and then got sheep, or did I get sheep and want to make yarn? And it was that I got sheep and started accumulating their shearing, their wool. And Shetland sheep don't have a lot of fleece, so it wasn't too bothersome to accumulate, a few fleeces a year. I remember that first time I went to the mill with their wool. I always saved the seconds, the belly wool, the shorts, and would put it in baskets in the barn for the cats to sleep in and such. And I really enjoyed that we could do that there was a use for that byproduct. And so the first time I had enough to meet the minimum, which was like 30 pounds or so, at a local mill, I had a feeling of like completeness because I was making my first yarn, and it became crystal clear to me that that was what I should be doing, is be a yarn maker, because I was going to be raising these animals who all had stories. They were going to be part of my life for as long as they lived. And so they needed a job too, which would be to produce wool for yarn, which I would then market. I felt like we had like a secret handshake, me and the sheep. That was part of my interest and intrigue to be a yarn farmer. I guess it has a lot to do with the relationship between me and the animals. Well, my first sheep, which was Maggie, the Shetland, that I was very, very attached to, as she was the matriarch of all of the other Shetlands that I had a pretty uneventful and boring life. She nibbled grasses and she grew and she was bred and had lambs, and she did that on repeat. And then we would shear her and make yarn with her wool. She doesn't have any stories. And what's special about that she doesn't have any stories is, like, I have a bit of a smug feeling that we did things right when we started with our Shetland flock, because they didn't teach me any hard lessons because they're so hardy and easy to care for. So it was a really great fit to have Shetland sheep as my first sheep, because I was a beginner sheep farmer. I didn't really realize it, but almost everybody loves Shetland wool. So it was a good product to have also. It is this very rich and rewarding experience to be part of this fiber farm community. When I get together with other fiber farmers, we obviously can bond over so many things. We share so many experiences. They're so difficult to explain to folks who have not laid on the barn floor all night trying to get a lamb to stand up to nurse and attend. Like, there's all of this physical and mental energy in the work that we're doing every day that is so relatable when you meet another farmer. Like, you know that they've experienced that the exact same way that you have. We have different opinions, like we have different thicknesses of skin, I want to say, and that's always a beautiful experience too when I'm in community, because we learn so much from each other. Like, somebody who's more sort of a softy and very tender-hearted like myself, who gets together with another farmer who has like a pragmatic approach to their work, teaches me so much, and then I might teach them something. So it's so supportive, and we really need that, since it's a very isolating career to be a farmer. I could tell you the tale of Lavender, one of my Cotswolds, and how she taught me how to make soap. She was a rescue, and I took she and her sister Hester on. She got kicked accidentally by my horse on Valentine's Day. She broke her leg, and there was no way that we were going to be able to fix her. And so I had to decide what to do so that she wouldn't be in pain. And I would say this was like one of my first very hard farm lessons and sheep raising lessons, was that I had to decide to put her down. And how would I do that? If we put her down, like if we euthanized her and needed to bury her body, it would be too hard because it was the middle of winter and everything was frozen. It was below zero. And if we used the butcher and he came and they shot her to put her down and then processed her body to harvest the meat, then we wouldn't have a body, which would be the right way to do it, so that we wouldn't draw coyotes to the farm, because a dead body would bring predators to the farm. Here I was very emotional about my sheep, but I had to make snap decisions like that, which I'd not ever had to do. And then I had to compartmentalize quite a bit. Decided to process her body for meat, and then they called me from the butchers and said, "What do you want to do with the fat, the tallow?" And I said, "Oh, I didn't know. I never thought about that question." And I realized that you make soap with tallow. And I said, "Well, please save it for me." So when it was ready and I picked it up, I taught myself how to make tallow soap. And so to this day, that's one of the products that I sell on my farm. I use sheep's milk and lanolin, and I actually get tallow from a local grass-fed beef farm. And it's all because of lavender. When you're raising livestock especially, that at some point in their life, when it's the end of their life, you'll have decisions to make. If you have a special one that, like, you're just going to dig a hole and bury them and do like a traditional commemoration, that's wonderful and beautiful, and I have done that. But a lot of times we farmers will have to think about like all the minutes of our days and our months and our weeks and about the animal. Once the animal has passed, like, what is the best way to use them? And if it turns out that they have a viable use for their meat or their bones or their horns or their wool or whatever, then in the spirit of not wasting things, in the spirit of sustainability and not turning the earth into a giant trash place, dump, like, use it up. Like, there are ways to use it. There are people that need nourishment. And then the effort and the energy that we put into that process of production is meaningful too, because these are not like slaughterhouse animals. They're not like, they didn't live a bad life. They had a great life. And so it's really wholesome feeling. In 2000, I had taken a trip with my kids and we had gone to England to visit friends. As we trained about the countryside, we saw the sheep everywhere, and we felt very much like we were in Vermont. And we said, why don't we have sheep? So of course, when we came home, we had the plan to have sheep. I had experience with livestock because when I was a kid, I lived in Massachusetts in the Berkshires, and I was in 4-H, and I lived on my grandparents' retired dairy farm. So I had exposure to animals like chickens and some cows, but we raised them, my grandparents raised them for beef at that point. And so I had been exposed to haying and, going to the fair and entering my canned goods and things like that and sewing my own clothes. But I never had raised sheep, nor had I known anybody who raised sheep. So it was a brand new adventure. And I homeschooled the kids, and so they were big readers. And we did a lot of reading and studied to figure out how best to fence them and how best to feed them and all that. And we just sort of learned together. And the kids, I want to say, left no stone unturned. And they were the ones that decided upon Shetlands. And I just kind of let them lead the way. The Valais Blacknose sheep are originally from Switzerland, from the Valais region. They are generally raised in the Alps, and then during the summer they're grazing there, and then brought down into the villages in the fall and winter and spring. So they lamb in the villages, in barnyards, etc. They are a sheep breed that was non-existent in the U.S. in 2018, but that was when we were first allowed to import the semen from New Zealand, which we were able to, bring straws of semen in so that we could inseminate foundation ewes. So I decided I wanted to have this breed on our farm when that was made possible because they're very cute. I didn't know a lot about the breed except that I'd fallen hard for, their looks over the internet. And sometimes I do things that way. I had been following every Valais Blacknose, anything online that I could, and found an auction that we could bid on ewes that were inseminated with the semen, and then they would, if I won the auction, I would be able to have these lambs born in the following spring. So sure, I'll bid on these ewes. I didn't really think I would win the bids because I don't usually win anything, and I just bid low. And then sure enough, and that was like in March, and then in August or September, I was getting these email notifications that my bid was, accepted. And I just started freaking out because I was like, no, that was just a ruse. I didn't mean to do this, but I did. And I couldn't get a hold of anybody online because it was some auction house, and it was California, and it was the middle of the night here or whatever it was when the emails were coming in. And so I panicked and didn't sleep all night because I was like, oh no, how am I going to afford them? How am I going to get them to Vermont? And then the woman who had put this sheep up for auction contacted me. She did receive some emails the next day, and she was in Oregon. And she said, no, don't worry about it. It's fine. You don't have to. I think I had bid on 8. And so I ended up getting 2. And I was, again, I didn't plan on this, so I hadn't budgeted for it. And I didn't plan on winning the bids. I was able to do some letter writing and get some sponsors and help me cover the expense and bring them over here on a transport vehicle with some other bred ewes that were going to other farms in the region, from Pennsylvania on up. And then it turned out that in the spring of 2019, we had the first Valais Blacknose lambs on the ground in Vermont here at our farm. And so the ewes that came to me were Teeswater ewes. And I'd never had that breed on the farm before, but I love them. And their fleece is beautiful. The temperament of the ewes that came to me was not like great. One of them is still a bit freaked out when you go by her. Anyway, I named them June and Dolly, and they had Jolene and Johnny and Danny and Dilly. And so anyway, we're still breeding Dilly, Jolene's being bred, and they still are throwing the next generation, they were considered F1s. Their lambs would be F2s. Their F2s have been bred now and have F3s. So we keep increasing the percentage of the Valais Blacknose genetics here in the United States. By 2020, we were allowed to import embryos. And so I did it again. I wrote some letters and I got some support so that I could invest in some embryos. And out of 4 embryos, only 1 was viable. So it was kind of not a great first year. But I did get 1 purebred ewe, and I named her Gwen Sheepfani. And then Gwen was bred, and Gwen has had some lambs. Gwenny's bred right now, so last year she had Gloria and Gladys, twin purebred ewe lambs, and they moved to Nashville. Anyway, then the next year I got 4 more embryos, and 3 out of the 4 survived. So I've now got my own ram. I've been able to breed them with my purebreds because they're not related, and increase the numbers of my flock. Met really fabulous farmers who have been my customers, and it's been a really interesting road. I've learned a lot about their fiber. These animals are huge compared to the rest of my sheep, but they're gentle giants. They follow you around like a puppy. They're not for everyone because they're such big animals, and so they're big consumers, and they've not been traditionally very good lambers. I'm glad I had as much knowledge as I did before I started, because it's been a bit of a trial with them. And I think that a lot of that has to do with not being able to see the sires and the dams in person. They come over in a test tube. And so I can't really pick out the way I would with my hands on the animal here in the United States. But we'll get there. The point was I had wanted to bring this new breed in. I wanted it to be like a legacy, something that I could be a part of. Linda Doan is the woman that's credited for bringing Shetland sheep into the state of Vermont. And so way back when I got my first Shetlands were on the Livestock Conservancy's rare breed list. But by now they're not. The Shetland breed is in recovery. And so I want it to be that someday, 20, 30, 40 years down the road, the Valais breed is, also successful in different countries, and to be a part of that is important to me. My plans for the future are that I should slow down my breeding program, and that is because they are large animals and I am not getting younger. The nice thing about their temperament being so agreeable is if they have a boo-boo, they don't mind if I fix it. They're just they don't run away, they're not shy, they're gentle giants. At the same time, they grow so much fiber that is not next to the skin saw. It's more specific how I'm going to use their fiber. And I don't necessarily need all that fiber, but maybe I'll figure out, a new use for it or something like that. But they are big consumers, being such large animals. And my farm is not really large enough to support a really big flock of such big consumers. So I'll continue to breed them and sell them on the smaller scale. There are many farmers that are now raising Valais Blacknose sheep that are all in and are putting the resources into doing it on a larger scale. And I say, go for it, do your thing. I'm just going to try to keep mine manageable for me, my program. For fiber farmers like myself in a small farm situation, I'm quite sure that we need to have something else. So If you are a full-time fiber farmer like me, that means, yes, you're selling yarn, you're dyeing yarn, you're making yarn, but you're also doing other things. So I have agritourism. I have events on the farm, such as an open farm day where the public comes and visits, and we have an artisans market, and we have a little farmers market. And we have lots of events for people to participate in. Or I have collaborated with partners to put on festivals to support other farms and makers and designers and such. So I'm always doing something outside of just raising the sheep or just making the yarn. I have a pie business. It's a little tiny income. I have an egg business. It's a little tiny income. And once in a while I write as a contributor to try to get a little tiny bit of income. And I don't mind it at all that I have diverse jobs, because I'm my own boss, and I really love that. And I love being able to be at the disposal of my flock so that I can prioritize them. It's a great way for me to wake up each day, get myself outside, which is so healthy for me. I think the work I do is hard, but it keeps me young. It makes me strong. I don't know if I would be doing this if I was working any other job. I don't know if I would be making my body do these things, or challenging my brain in the way that I challenge my brain. Like I give myself numerous challenges every single day. When you buy from a small farmer and you're buying local yarn, you are supporting the farmer, because then they can afford to pay for the processing of the yarn, which is one thing that keeps a lot of small fiber farmers from continuing, is that the expense of processing is so high. But you're paying for the feed of the animals, the hay and the grain, and so you're helping the farmer to cover those expenses. There's not very much after that, depending on how much you charge for your yarn. But the money that goes to the local grain store is helping to support their staff. So there's a small staff at my local grain store that I know everybody by name, and they know me, and they know any of my helpers by name. They have like weekly paychecks because of farmers like me. And then because weekly I am buying lots from their store. And then we have the local hay farmer who right now delivers oil during the winter months, but during the summer months he's making hay all summer, and so he fills my barn up with hay, and it's a big expense for me, but it's a big income for him. So buying yarn from a small farmer means keeping another small business person in business. All these people are benefiting because they're processing your yarn from your animals. You're going to be cutting a check when it's all done that's going to help them meet their payroll so they can go home, they can feed their families. And so it feels like a very tangible way for you to support local businesses by buying from a small farmer or a small producer. The shearing part, I leaned heavily on helpers to let me know who to call for shearing and things of that sort. And I had a vet at the time that would come to the farm. He was a retired dairy vet, and he came here and loved working with the sheep because they were smaller, and he had the extra time to talk to me about how I was doing things and what to do. When our shearer came, he seemed older at the time, but now I know he was it was almost 25 years ago, and so he was considerably younger. He's in his 70s now, so he was in his early 50s. He's always been rather weathered, right? Everything that he said to us felt like the Book of Sheep, like it was from the Book of Sheep. It was so great when Fred would open his mouth and we would all just listen, and he would tell us, oh, well, you need to do this, or oh, you should do that, or oh, this one smells like that, and this one's got lice, and everything Fred said was the gospel of sheep. So we got very excited when we would have Fred come and shear the sheep, because we knew that we were going to, get our ears filled up with wisdom. And that's how I learned. And I was also a member of the Vermont Sheep and Goat Association, and that was great, to make connections with other sheep and goat farmers in the state. My flock has grown so much beyond the 12 Shetland sheep that he used to shear for me for quite a few years, to now 70 plus sheep that are Like there's probably 35 Shetlands, but there are a lot of sheep that are 300 pounds and more. It's a big order. I met Siri and Colin through the sheep circles now. Like we have a little line where we say sheep friends are the best friends. And a lot of us small farmers collaborate and commune with each other, obviously. Siri and Colin are originally from near Boston and Connecticut and moved to Vermont. So I consider them neighbors. And they've been involved in like 4-H fairs and with a lot of livestock shows, and they've been judges. And Siri would have her sheep at one of the events that I was at in Rhinebeck, New York. So we kind of knew each other that way. And I learned a lot by watching them do demos. When they first decided, yes, they would come here and shear my sheep, I really felt kind of honored that we would have them there, very skilled. Siri and Colin are fast, but they love the sheep. And that is one of the things that has me most endeared to them. I've had a lot of different shearers, you know, Fred, whom I started with, but now to Siri and Colin and in between. And they'll finish shearing a sheep from top to bottom, and you can catch them lean in a little and give that sheep a little hug. And of course, that means a lot to me that they care that much. Tomorrow, when Siri and Colin get here, we'll have to get the extension cords wheeled out and plug each of them in. We hang up their shearing equipment from a beam in the barn, and they use a big piece of plywood to be their shearing floor, and they'll do some warm-up exercises, and then we have like kind of wranglers, so me and one or two other people, probably my friend, my helper Reagan will help me with that. We'll grab the sheep, and so the sheep will have like an order. I think I'm going to do the rams first because they're the biggest, and everybody's going to be locked up in the barn in different stalls, and they're going to be mighty upset because they haven't been fed or had water yet, because it's better to shear them on an empty stomach. So we'll probably grab those big burly rams, one for Siri, one for Colin, and then they'll start by peeling the wool off of them. It's going to be beautiful because they're so woolly. They're the Valais Blacknose sheep, and it's going to fall off and be gorgeous. We'll sweep, and we will end up having a bucket that we call the seconds or the belly wool. We'll put all of those little trimmings into that. We'll take the fleece and we'll bring it out to put on the skirting table. I won't be trying to skirt also because I'll be managing the sheep, but there are some friends that are coming that will skirt, and that means that they'll pull the vegetative matter out, or mats or manure tags, etc. And then after that, we'll just keep supplying sheep to Siri and Colin, and then transport the sheep to wherever they go to afterwards. We'll have the wool separated and to bring it over to the skirting tables, and then we'll separate and sort the sheep because there will be the rams that go out, and then we'll do the pregnant ewes. And we have a couple of mamas and their babies. Obviously the babies don't need to be shorn, but the babies will need to be present, or else the mamas will be upset and the babies will be upset to be separated. We have a lot of little special cases out there. Shearing is really important because the sheep will tell you right now that they are just dying to get that wool off them because they're itchy. So they depend on us to remove their fleece. So it's a lot about the animals, because I know how much happier they'll be once we shear them tomorrow. And then also, as a fiber farmer, it's about optimizing when we harvest that fleece, because if we wait too long, the fleece will break down because it might get felted or it's just damaged in many ways. The timing of getting the fleeces off to retain the integrity of the fiber is just as important as it is that we want to relieve the animal of an uncomfortable situation.